got 1 o'clock. It is great to be here and to see some of you. Hopefully some of you can turn your cameras on so we can see you in this world of somewhat normalcy as we get back into face-to-face programming, hopefully, eventually. I would like to welcome you to our virtual conference for IUFRO. And many of you are familiar with IUFRO. If not, it's the International Union of Forestry Research Organizations, and our particular working party is no doubt the best working party, 9.0103, Extension and Knowledge Exchange. I've been very fortunate to have provided some leadership as the coordinator, but the real work gets done by our deputies, many of which are on, and you'll hear from in the upcoming few days. But excited to be here, excited to have you with us. We do have a full agenda today. I want to extend a personal thank you to Dr. Bob Barden at North Carolina State, who through thick and thin has provided leadership for the conference. We had a wonderful conference planned in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and we had a facility set up. We had some great music and food and field trip venues set up, and then of course things went into a tailspin after that. So it's great to see that we still have some momentum moving forward and some very dedicated individuals. And again, this is the only organization of its kind in the world. So this offers us an opportunity to share our interests and our passion for extension and knowledge exchange and working with stakeholders to really make the world a better place. And so it's, to me, it's one of the best organizations to be involved in. The opportunity to meet people from all over the globe really is one of the hallmarks. So we'll get back into some face-to-face programming. If you stick with us through the business meeting at the end of the third session, then we'll have an exciting announcement about where we hope to see you all at our next face-to-face conference. But just a little bit about the program over the next week or two. When the planning committee got together, we felt it would make more sense to provide you with a shorter version, several segments of the conference, rather than hitting you over the head with a full day conference, which none of us enjoy much, and several of us have failed at conducting and participating in those. So we hope you like this new format. It's designed to keep you interested and engaged. Hopefully you have all three programs on your calendar. Bob, I don't know if you might tell us what those other two dates are. I can't look those up while I'm sharing the screen, but I know we've got today. We'll get started here in a minute, and then we've got two other dates and times located. So appreciate you all coming in from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. And Bob, can you give us a quick reminder on those other two dates?
The other dates are May 3rd and May 10th, starting at the same time as today.
Great. Okay, well, we won't spend too much time with introductions and icebreaker kinds of activities, but if you wouldn't mind, as Jeff Jackson just did, thank you, Jeff, putting in a little bit about yourself in the chat window, chat box. Yeah, just tell us who you are, where you're from, and something interesting. I'll tell you, it's chilly here on the East Coast of the United States, northern mid-Atlantic up here in Maryland. It's only 60 degrees Fahrenheit and about 16 degrees Celsius. So I hope your weather is getting a little warmer where you're at. And so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm very excited to moderate the session. Bob will be in the background in case you have questions or needs. He'll hopefully be helping me monitor the chat and questions box. And so each speaker will have 20 minutes. And you all did receive, I hope, a copy of the agenda. And what we'll do is go through the presentation, have a few minutes engaged in that for questions and clarifying answers. And then if we have any time before our break, we can have a general panel discussion from our three presenters. So again, exciting to have the team with us. And I'm going to kick it right off with our first presentation. Let's see, I think I've got one more slide to show here, just to let you know what today is going to look like here. So we'll get through this first set of presentations, each with the 20 minutes with inclusive of questions and answers. And then we'll wrap it up after this first session, take a 10-minute break, come back for another hour, and then give you a little bit of information on the next presentation. So to kick things off, one of our very own board members, Alice Poljanek, will be here with the Slovenia Forest Service. Alice has come in at last minute to help out with a colleague presenting this. So we were supposed to hear from Boris Rantasa, but Alice has been kind enough to step in. And the presentation of his presentation, the title of his presentation is Hybrid Stakeholder Participation in the COVID Era, a case study of the renewal of Slovenian 10-year regional forest and game management plan. So I'll stop my screen sharing and see if you can turn yours on, Alice. Great, we can see that just fine. So whenever you're ready, you're on mute right now. See if you can unmute, Alice. Hey, there we go.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I'm coming from Slovenia, from Bled, actually. Here is 7 o'clock in the evening, so not so late. But anyway, I jump up today with this presentation, which should be presented by Boris Rantasha, my colleague from the office. But unfortunately, he could not come today here with us. Anyway, we both come from Slovenia Forest Service. And our organization is the main forestry organization in Slovenia. Our main task is planning and overseeing forest management for all Slovenia forests. We are also specialists in close to nature forest management, but we also do some research work, more operational one, not so academic, and we provide public forest service for all forests in Slovenia. So what we would like to share today with you is, first we would like to present some basics of forest management in Slovenia, and to present the importance of participatory approach to cope the modern challenges which forestry facing nowadays. And the main part of the presentation will be the presenting participatory process of renewal of Slovenia 10-year regional forest management plan. And at the end, I would like to summarize some lessons learned that we get from this almost 3-year-long process. So for those who are not familiar with Slovenia, I would like to share with you some basics of Slovenia forest management. So we have quite a long tradition of forest management dating back 250 years from the first forest management plan, which also have included sustainability principles. But in the 70s, there was a huge headway towards close to nature forest management, which is now one of the main principles that we practice in all Slovenia forests. Beside that, we also practice sustainable and multi-purpose forest management. So that kind of management, we believe, that allows us to address a complex and diverse expectations from society for the forests, and also allows us to implement new green European policy, forestry and environmental policy, which could be seen in 3 pillars like biodiversity, mitigation and adaptation to the climate change, and green circular economy. So to realize this challenge that forestry is facing, we have a tool, important tool, that is a hierarchically organized forest and hunting management planning system on a different levels. On the regional level, this is a strategic plans, 14 for the management units and 15 for the game management units. And then we have a tactical plan and very operational plan. But today I will focus on renovation of this strategic plan, which are also an important tool of forest policy to implement it, these policy obstacles into the forest. So in 2020-21, and the process is still going on, we launched the process of renewal of regional forest management plans. These are 10-year plans, which will be lead development of the forest in the next 10 years by the 2030. So in order to harmonize these diverse interests that society expects from the forest, the participation of stakeholders is a crucial element of this process. So participation in forest management planning is also formally prescribed by the legislation in the 2 parts. First, with collecting interest at the beginning of the process, and at the end of the process with public presentation of the process. That is quite small chances to participate at the beginning, at the end. So we try to improve this with informed ways of the involvement of forest owners and other stakeholders, and including them in the process when the management plans were renewed. And these additional steps provide a boost to the forest dialogue, which is an ongoing national stakeholder diverse forest policy process. So, and how did we involve the stakeholders? So, just in the beginning of this process, the COVID pandemic starts. So communication between individuals and organizations has been radically altered. So we need to adapt and try to find other ways how to involve people in the process. most activities had to be done by a digital way, but when with changing epidemiological situation and also with some expression wishes of stakeholder, we also managed to organize some workshops also in person, which was quite nice. So we used very different tools and channels to involve people. We set up a website. We organize a web conference. We collecting initiatives with online forums. Also, we organize public survey and different online and in-person workshops, and also we put a lot of efforts in the public relations. So at the beginning of the process in November, we set up the website, which was some kind of communication window for the process. In the website, you can follow the process, you get the information about the process, timeline and some graphics, news and announcements, and also some results of the workshops and other different tools that we use. So people quite used on this, and they get all information on the website. So we begin with our process with web conference. We organize a web event. We use WebEx events tool, and also within this we use questions and answer tools. We prepare presentations, and we made also these presentations available on YouTube channel, that people who missed the conference could get the presentation and have some information about how the process will go in the next 2 years. And we also provide some press release and information, informal media briefings. So at the last 2 months in the 2020, the collecting initiatives, which is a formal part of the participation, was set up in order to measure stakeholder expectations regarding goals of regional forest and game management plans. We use digital forms to collect all the expectations from the public. And at the end of the process, we analyze all these initiatives and provide a summary on this. And also we select the initiatives that could be integrated in the plans, and we also get a lot of information and initiatives which could not be in scope of the plan and should be solved in different ways at the policy or at operational level. So we were quite satisfied with the response. We get 148 responses from almost 130 different stakeholders, and we got 300 different initiatives. That was quite a lot of stuff to analyze, but at the end we improved our plans with this quite much. So in the first half of 2021, we organized online workshops. The COVID pandemic still not allowed to do workshops in person. we did it on regional level, and the main scope was to get a feedback from the participants about main problems and future opportunities of forest and game management in the region. And we use these results to improve our analytical part of the management plans. So we still use Cisco WebEx events, and we also use Google Jamboard. So before organizing these regional workshops, we prepare a manual on workshops organization, PowerPoint templates. We also do some training workshops for facilitators and technical staff, and we also need ongoing support for organizations during the workshops at the regional level. The main method was SWOT analysis for each forest and game management region. Also for that, we prepared training manual and video tutorial, which was development in the BioGo project. So that is an example of the SWOT analysis. We got quite a good response and a lot of ideas how to improve our analytical part of the plans. So the next step was public survey. Online survey was launched to get some ideas what the people expect from with the forest. So we evaluate forest management objectives, and we also get quite a nice response of 629 records. So from the analysis, we recognize that timber production in Slovenia is still a very important goal of forest management, but we also notice that the increasing importance of environmental and climate-related goals that public expect from the forest too. So the last workshops, which was also organized in 14 different units, was in person. The pandemics enable with some protecting measures also a person contact, and the purpose of these workshops was to discuss the future of the forest management and game management plans. What are the goals, what are the strategies, and what are the measures that we like to implement in the next 10 years. And because this topic is quite difficult, because there is a lot of different interest in the forest, so the in-person workshop was quite good, because it's easier to communicate different interests with in-person approach. So we prepare a presentation, and then we have a discussion with the sticky notes and on posters. So like this, it was quite nice, because after a long time, people come together, have also some informal discussion. They meet, they talk about the topic with each other, and it was quite nice after a long time to see people coming together. So, and just a few statistics. we get involved more than 200 different people from different field of work. We had governmental organization, forest professionals, nature conservations, NGOs, also some tourist officers and people who works in the culture and health. So we try to reach different fields of work to get input from all the different expectations that people expect from the forest. So during the whole process, we also have a public relations, a good support for public relations. We prepare several media publications. We also get some publications at the national TV and national radio. But also we use website channels. We have press release and media release in the local and also at the state level. So if I can conclude, we recognize that web-based digital participation is an opportunity. So there is an opportunity for the participants. This kind of participation is easy to contribute. It's not required a lot of time because you don't need to travel, and also is cheaper because there is no travel expenses. We get quite a lot of people involved, more than in the in-person workshops. There is no limits for the number of participants, and also for the organizer is quite cheap. And what is for us, what was the most important was that that digital participation methods allows powerful and easy use, and also the analyses are quite quick. We can get results online immediately, so the process can be much more rich than in person, when usually we analyze results after the workshop is done. Also, we can conclude that digital participation is quite challenging. It is time-consuming and challenging for implementation. So it needs a lot of preparation, a lot of work for those who organizing this, and also what is constrained is that there is no verbal communication, no interaction between people, and no socializing, which is also very important, that people meet, they talk each other, and of course you never know how the techniques will work. It could be easier, it comes with some problems, but nevertheless with this kind of approach we somehow improve our plans, the content of our plans, and also we give we improve the accessibility and legitimacy of the plans, and we also overcome the obstacles to implementing these plans in the future. The process contributed to clarify which problems the plans could solve and which problem could be addressed with other stakeholders on the other levels, let's say at the governmental or at the operational level, or with other techniques. So what about the future? We believe that the combination of in-person and digital participation have some potential for the future participatory process. Digital participation seems to be more suitable for addressing or to get a general feedback from the public, but in-person participation enables addressing a more complex or difficult issues in smaller groups. And by combining both approaches, we have more options to achieve an approach that is tailored to our topic, to stakeholders that we want to reach, and also to our budget that we have for that kind of process. So thank you very much. And if you have some questions, if it is time, I will be glad to answer it.
Thank you, LS. And it looks like we are a little tight on time for questions at this point. But if there's anything burning, let me know. Anybody? Otherwise, maybe you could pop it in the chat for him. But excellent job, thank you. And I know you didn't have a lot of time to prepare and get started on this. So great job, thank you. Okay, Angela, let's see if you can get your presentation queued up while I introduce you. And Angela Gupta is with the University of Minnesota Extension. And her presentation is on jumping worms, citizen science, solving problems and helping people. Thank you, Angela. The floor is yours.
Excellent. So thanks. I'm going to talk today about this Jumping Worm Community Science project, but I just want to start out with saying I think this could be applied to many troublesome issues in natural resources. So first, a little bit of background. We've been doing invasive species, citizen and community science for many years. And in 2019, a primary program of ours, Forest Pest First Detector, made a decision to try something new and to launch a number of invasive species, what we called citizen science projects in 2020. So that decision was made pre-pandemic. It ended up being very fortuitous though, as coronavirus crashed down on the world and everybody ended up stay-at-home orders and our lives really changed because of the pandemic. We were able to go ahead and roll out these projects, including the Jumping Worm project. So I just want to say straight away, if you're interested, I'll drop this link into the chat later, but all of our research projects are, these community science projects are on there. All of the outreach was done through existing extension channels and social media accounts. So there was no additional targeted outreach just around these. It was all done through existing channels. And there was no designated funding for any of these projects, but really I'm talking about jumping worms today. So now I want to talk a little bit about worms. Worms generally, in Minnesota, we have no native earthworms. They are all invasive, and earthworms themselves are ecosystem engineers. And so because there are no management solutions for worms, prevention is the best solution. But if prevention doesn't work and you have worms, then we have no scientifically recommended management. So worms, fundamentally, not just jumping worms, are invasive. And invasive, you have a species needs to have economic, ecological, or human health harm. And worms do all of these things. So they change the soil composition. And as they do that, they increase ragweed, which increases allergies. They can increase tick populations, which of course is a vector for Lyme disease. They change the ecosystem that makes it more conducive for buckthorn, an invasive plant. It is also the overwintering host for soybean aphid. There is a biocontrol Asian lady beetle intended to control aphids. It doesn't work as well as hoped. That can increase allergies. technologies. Soybean aphid is the largest pest on soybeans in the state of Minnesota. So soybean aphids reduce crop productivity, which of course is an economic impact. The earthworms can also change soil characteristics that reduce forest productivity and forest biodiversity. They change fire and drought regimes. So in summary, earthworms are invasive in Minnesota, cause all of these troubles. And then jumping worms specifically are even more interesting and unique in that our traditional suite of invasive earthworms in Minnesota occupies a soil horizon from about 0 feet to 6 feet down. And when jumping worms move in, for reasons we don't entirely understand, all of our other invasive worms seem to disappear, but jumping worms live almost exclusively in that top 4 or 5 inches of soil. Yet the density of worms can double or triple with jumping worms. So you have a lot more worms right at the surfaces, which is where a lot of our forest understory plants are trying to grow. And it's also where gardeners are actively working. So a lot of gardeners and landowners would experience jumping worms potentially first with this really drastically changed soil. It's a lot like coffee grounds in its composition. And then the jumping worms can kill plants, particularly shallow rooted plants. Hostas are commonly identified. That jumping worms can increase erosion again with this really drastic change to soil structure. And it can be really hard to grow plants in general. So I'm going to play this short video. I don't think you can hear the audio and it doesn't matter, but this is what a person might experience when they run into jumping worms, again, in that top few inches of soil. They're very active. That's where they get their name. They're startling and their densities are really quite high, which is part of how they're causing so many problems in our forests and our gardens. And so what often happens is, at least back in 2019, people were discovering they were getting jumping worms and they were very new to the state of Minnesota. And then they really wanted solutions, answers on how to manage them. And there are no scientifically recommended management solutions for jumping worms. In addition, jumping worms impact it feels like about everything a gardener might do in their landscape. And so jumping worms overwinter as eggs that are roughly the size of peppercorns to poppy seeds, depending upon the species. We generally believe we have one primary species in Minnesota, although we don't typically identify them to species. Then in the spring, these eggs emerge and hatch as very tiny worms, and then they slowly grow until about midsummer. For us, that's mid-July to August. And it's only in mid-July to August that they become mature worms, about the size of a standard a nightcrawler earthworm. But an important difference is the clitellum on a jumping worm is 11 to 13 segments from the head, so much closer to the head than it would be on a nightcrawler. But they're fairly large worms. And so we will not identify jumping worms until they've developed this clitellum and are sexually mature, again, about mid-July to August in Minnesota. So the whole beginning of the growing season, we simply can't tell homeowners and landowners if they have jumping worms, and that is immensely frustrating for them. Then, so starting from mid-July to August up until the ground freezes, we think it actually takes a hard freeze for the jumping worms to be killed. Those worms can mature and lay eggs, and those eggs are all in that very tip top of the soil, those first few inches, which means that when we rake our leaves in the fall, it is highly probable that we will move jumping worms and or eggs as we move our leaf material. So it feels like that worms can move in kind of all substances that might be in a home landscape. So we know that worms can move in potted plants, in soil, in compost, and in leaves. And so it just feels like they kind of inundate all aspects of a landscape. So to address this in 2020, we started this citizen science project, which I now really frame as a community science project. And in 2022, we continued it. And I think the final year will be this year, 2021, we continued it, and the final year will be 2022. And so this unique value proposition for 2021 reads, the 2021 Jumping Worm Report Management Project will serve a dual purpose. It will provide emotional support to landowners impacted by jumping worms and gather data from landowners on their jumping worm management activities in order to inform future scientific research and empower others impacted by jumping worms. And so in year one, we really only did the second part, the gather information. But in year two, I added this emotional component because it felt really important to the volunteer community to do that. And so fundamentally, all I'm doing is using Google Docs, so a really easy platform. I'm asking these very creative landowners and gardeners to tell me what they're doing related to jumping worms and if it's working. And so these are the outcomes for 2020. And you can see this is a picture of someone trying solarization. So the idea that they heat the soil enough to kill the eggs and the worms, and then at least that little spot is jumping worm free at the beginning of the growing season. So during 2020, lots of people tried management trials of all sorts of things, including solarization. They observed the environmental impacts of jumping worms on native and non-native plants. And then they tried to inform potential management research. And there is some, peer-reviewed scientific research happening in a couple of institutions, and we're working with them to try to really close that loop. And then it became really clear that these volunteers needed emotional support and additional resources that I frankly did not have. There were 20 of the 23 volunteers were female, which is a recurring theme in my projects. The more we ask of them, the more they tend to be female, which is curious. So then in that first pandemic winter of 2020, 2021, our Minnesota Master Naturalist online trainees were having to come up with capstone courses for a fully online training, something they'd not done before. And I pitched this literature review to look at the emotional impacts of jumping worms. And it turns out they accepted the lit review, but there is no literature that we could find out there about the emotional impacts of jumping worms. So we had to broaden our scope to include essentially the emotional impact of climate change and figure out how that could be applicable to jumping worms. And so I am delighted that we were able to include some things that we learned. So solastalgia is the kind of emotional sense of loss that one might experience. Let's say if you grew up on a lake or on a farm and you go back, let's say 20 years later to go visit that area that you grew up or you visited regularly as a youth, and it's been turned into a Walmart parking lot, for example. You might feel a sense of loss, and that's solastalgia. Serious leisure is a personal identity that you get from a hobby. And so for gardeners in particular, and for forest landowners, the management of that forest or the management of their yard and garden may be a very serious hobby to them. And jumping worms, particularly if they feel as if they might have brought them to the site and thus contributed to that infestation, can be a serious dent to their psyche and their self-image. And then there's something called disenfranchised grief, and that is grief for which our society does not have rituals or rules. And so certainly worm infestations fall into that category. So people are going through the stages of grief and no one really is very empathetic to them. So it turns out that when we did this research and this literature, there are ways in which you can help manage these emotions through creating your own rituals to grieve and to move forward. Hope and agency, enabling volunteers and homeowners with jumping worms to have hope and agency is incredibly important to continued management. And it turns out that this project does do that to volunteers, and I have data for that in a moment. And then just to continually remind people that nature-based human health benefits persist just by working outdoors. So it doesn't matter if you're doing different work than you anticipated, the act of doing the work outdoors in the fresh air and getting your hands dirty has positive human health impacts. So then by combining the findings from 2020 and 2021, we are able to establish that volunteers do report a reduction in jumping worm numbers by trying a bunch of different stuff. And that we do absolutely know now that jumping worms cause strong emotions in the people that have to manage them. And that participants of this project, feelings change in positive and important ways simply by participating in this project. And then finally, integrated pest management does offer promise for reducing jumping worm numbers within the home landscape. So let's take that apart a little bit. So we did a survey this past winter to really about these volunteers and looking at the emotional impacts. And really this came from my getting calls on which these people would call and cry on the phone about their jumping worms. And as a forester, like I'm not really trained in therapy. And it was just this reoccurring theme with jumping worms. So our survey results yielded that jumping worms do cause a lot of sadness, fear, panic, impatience, and anger, and increase negative thoughts and provoke tears. By participating in this project, participants' feelings became more positive, reducing worry and increasing confidence. They increased attention to environmental change, and they increased their jumping worm outreach efforts. So these are really positive impacts. In addition, even when jumping worm management costs more money and takes time, respondents reported a sharp increase in effort to manage those jumping worms. So even though that there's this barrier of time and money, they persisted, and they really did a lot of work. And then finally, as communicators, we, as the people articulating the message, must manage the stories and actions we tell, because those can also cause anxiety, mourning, anger, hopelessness, and motivation. So we really need to manage our message. And I just want to say that the respondents of this survey were predominantly middle-aged. 57.5 was the median age. They were almost exclusively white at 92% and 88% female. So this is kind of the summary chart of where this data came from. So what do you think of the stories and actions about jumping worms? And you can see when I sum these three columns to get this moderately to extremely well, you can see the ranking that these stories themselves increase anxiety, mourning, anger, hopelessness, and motivation. Similarly, crying and negative thoughts. So 57% of respondents right here reported negative thoughts about jumping worms. 19% reported crying, either publicly or privately, and 19% had a heightened sensitivity to jumping worms. And so I just want to close. This is a big table with all the projects I did on this continuum scale from crowdsourcing to citizen and community science. And I just want to say, I think there's immense potential to engage community members to help answer diverse and complex natural resource questions. And this is just one example of how community scientists can be used to try to get to these really wicked solutions. So with that, I will close with, there are many projects that I would love to do and frankly had intended to do in 2022, but because of reduced capacity at University of Minnesota Extension, I'm not sure they will happen. I'm actually quite certain that the ones crossed out will not. But I think this slide was meant to say, I think there's a lot that community scientists can do to help answer questions as we move forward in this really complicated and changing environment, and I hope we can continue to engage them. So if I have time, I will take questions, and I will stop sharing my screen for now.
Thanks, Angela. And you do actually have time. You've got about 3 minutes. So if someone, or if anybody has a comment or question, you can either unmute your mic or you can type it into the chat box. I find, Angela, that this kind of work is so important and fascinating because it's more engaging, and it's more of a two-way interaction rather than the old classic, we're gonna, dump all this great information on you. So I really commend you for, looking into the future, adaptive learning, just peer-to-peer. There's so many things that can come out of this, that are coming out of the work you're doing. So great, in my opinion, great work. And I hope you continue this in other areas, and I hope others pick up on what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe if I can give a quick answer and get a couple of the questions answered. So I have to say that I feel like I started these projects as citizen science projects, and that traditional, here's the question that we want answered, and we're hoping that you can collect data and help us understand it. This one was always a little different because it was like, tell us what we're doing and help us solve this question that we don't have an answer to. But I really viewed it to switch to community science in that iterative relationship when I started including the emotional aspect. Because it was so clear that these people were going through such emotional turmoil, and I wasn't addressing it, that's when I added that. And that really felt like that now it's a two-way street, and it became community science in a more proper term. The question was, how did I recruit? So everything was done through social media channels already existing. So really we're talking Facebook and I think we have Twitter account posts, and actually only a couple of them throughout the growing season. And you could only participate if you had jumping worms that you were managing. So, it wasn't for everybody. It was this really select group. But a lot of people were already kind of finding me because I had done some work around earthworms, and we were really upping our information on jumping worms on our website. And so they were coming to me with questions. And then I would be like, look, if you have them, you can join this project. And you could see them all of a sudden start to shift, right? I had acknowledged that they had a problem. I had clearly articulated that it weren't alone. And then I'd offered them an opportunity to make a difference as we all learned together. And you could just see the shift. The thank yous and gratitudes came immediately with that response. And many of those people then signed up. Not all of them produced good information. I'll just say that. Many of them signed up and then never kind of circled back. But the ones that did produce good information often produced really good information. And that's okay, right? So that was one thing. Costs. So there was no specially allocated money for this project, which is both a curse and a blessing. So it meant that it was just my extension time, for which there has traditionally been a fair bit of flexibility. But it also meant that because there was no, let's say, grant funding, I was not confined. So when it looked like the community needed more emotional help, I didn't have to like go back to the funder and retweak my question or try to jam it into this awkward space around management. I had just the flexibility to do that. The flip side is, now that our capacity is reduced, there's no compelling reason for me to keep doing it, because we have to sort of reallocate and do some more traditional core forestry work. And so this jumping worm work, which did go, I was hoping to have more woodland owners. I got more homeowners. And so it gets a little further from extension forestry at each step. And so it becomes harder and harder to rationalize. And I think that is a true problem with community science done well. If you start addressing the questions of the community, it may stray from the primary core area of you, the content expert, and or the funder. And I don't know, I mean, I think that's an awkward space in community science. I'm probably running out of time, but I think I slid in a couple of answers there, and I'm happy to take others from the side.
That's perfect. Right on time.
Thanks.
And again, we'll have hopefully have a little bit about 10 minutes or so after our last presentation. So let's see if Jeff can get his PowerPoint queued up. Welcome to some of our new joinees. If you want to put in a little bit about yourself in the chat box, that'd be great. Our last presenter for this first opening session is Jeff Jackson with University of Minnesota as well. And his title, Supporting Hybrid Poplar Utilization Through an Adaptive Extension Learning Model. So Jeff, thanks for taking the time to give us a little bit of input on your program.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Jeff Jackson. I'm an extension educator with the University of Minnesota, and I'm on the forestry team with Angie Gupta, who you just heard with. And I'm excited to be with you today to discuss this learning model that we developed. So a little bit about myself. For the past 20 years, I've worked in education and outreach roles, focusing on energy efficiency, natural resources, and most recently, hybrid poplar. So I'd also like to mention my colleagues' contributions. Nate Meyer is also with University of Minnesota Extension. John Duplessis and Neil Nelson are with the University of Minnesota Duluth Natural Resources Research Institute. So hybrid poplar is one tree with many uses. And this slide lists some of the potential uses of hybrid poplar. It's a tree of promise, but actually getting hybrid poplar on the landscape for these uses is a large and complex problem. So the project I'll be discussing is a 3-year joint partnership between University of Minnesota Extension, who I'll refer to as Extension, and the Natural Resources Research Institute, University of Minnesota Duluth, which we'll refer to as NRRI. So this project embedded myself, an extension staff member, within NRI's hybrid poplar research team to advance a Midwestern hybrid poplar supply chain. NRI's hybrid poplar research program has been selecting, breeding, and establishing field trials of hybrid poplar since 1996. So initially on this project, we as Extension had some ideas, but we didn't really know how we could advance the use of hybrid poplar. So this presentation is about our journey, what we learned, and the results that we saw. So here's our roadmap for my presentation. With time being limited, I'll just give you a brief introduction to the model, then talk about the activities that we did for this project. We'll talk about a few key results and outcomes, and then we'll wrap it up. So beginning with an introduction to the adaptive extension learning model that we developed. So through this project, we found a pattern that generated success. We put what we learned into words and graphics, and through that process, we developed the social, ecological, innovation, and action model. And I know that's a mouthful, but this model assumes that Extension does not know the most effective way to advance the use of hybrid poplar. And therefore, we adapt to help Extension to continually improve our approach. So let's begin to walk through the model, starting with the 4 questions on the inside of the triangle. The answers to these questions were unknown to us at the beginning of the project, and our work helped answer them. So beginning at the very center with why. So why the innovation? That refers to the importance of hybrid poplar as a feedstock, which can help solve big environmental issues. So who is the target audience? That refers to who needs to be involved to advance the use of hybrid poplar. How can society transition to using hybrid poplar as a feedstock? That refers to the possible future scenarios that could help us make progress. And what can Extension do to help the transition? That refers to the activities Extension should engage in to make progress. Now we'll explore the activities that we as Extension accomplished while using the model for guidance. So this slide shows a high-level overview of what we did and how it fits into the model. Starting at the top with network weaving. Network weaving is facilitating new collaborations and strengthening relationships. It's the process of connecting new people into the network of people working with hybrid poplar in some capacity. So to begin weaving the network, we began with a social network analysis. This was a survey that identified active members of the network of people working with hybrid poplar. Once we identified these people, we used all of our activities to strengthen and create new connections in the network. For example, our tracking showed that we personally facilitated at least 61 connections between people from different organizations. Moving down now to collaborative learning. Collaborative learning is learning from each other. It helps us understand the best actions to take and also builds relationships among stakeholders. So to facilitate this, we convened 3 collaborative learning sessions with a total of 31 attendees. These sessions identified important opportunities and barriers to the utilization of hybrid poplar. The collaborative learning helped facilitate scenario planning, which is thinking through future scenarios and strategies for how to get there. This led to stakeholders moving forward with cooperative action. In this project, Extension facilitated cooperative action, but we were not directly involved in it. Moving now over to adaptive programming. So this is the Extension process of flexing our education goals and deliverables to help key stakeholders. And I've heard this word adaptive already this afternoon a few times. Rather than working with predetermined plans or targeting predetermined audiences, we adapt our plans to suit the network's need for information or new connections with each other. So we use structured interviews with experts, which we called key informant interviews, to refine and adapt our programming. And we did 25 of those. These interviews also provided important information that highlighted new market opportunities for hybrid poplar. Responsive education is, of course, one of Extension's roles. To accomplish this, we facilitated 27 webinars and workshops about hybrid poplar and other short rotation woody crops. The 37 web meetings were small group online discussions intended to share information that could lead to the advancement of the use of hybrid poplar. These web meetings also created new connections in the network. Now we'll discuss key results and outcomes from the project. To evaluate the effectiveness of our work, Extension typically uses evaluation surveys following learning opportunities. We saw positive shifts in knowledge levels, perceptions, and behavior changes. We only have time now to talk about behavior changes, but during the Q&A, feel free to ask me about other evaluation results that we saw. So these results come from a final project survey, which we did in December, which was completed by 30 people. Now, the question shown on the slide is, which of the following, if any, happened through your involvement in our project webinars and web meetings? And they could check any that applied. The 4 possible responses are shown over here on the left side. The red bars to the right showed the percent of responses with a positive answer. So beginning with the first one, 83% of respondents became aware of a person who works with hybrid poplar that they hadn't known about before. 20% of respondents met a person who works with hybrid poplar whom they hadn't met before. 20% called or emailed a person who works with hybrid poplar that they hadn't been in contact with before. And what was really exciting to us is that 17% indicated they had begun collaborating with a person who works with hybrid poplar that they hadn't collaborated with before. So we knew that significant communication, networking, and collaboration were already happening within our audience. But these results show that all 3 were increased by our meetings and webinars. So through this project, we developed a list of assumptions about hybrid poplar commercialization and Extension's role in advancing hybrid poplar. A question on the final project survey was designed to test these assumptions. For the sake of time, we will only discuss our 3 assumptions about Extension's role. So what I'll do, I'll read each assumption out loud to you and discuss the levels of agreement that we saw with these statements. On the graph, the percent of responses is over here on the y-axis. The top segment in each bar represents strong agreement. The segments then descend in order to agreement, neither agree nor disagree, which is the neutral response. And there were no respondents that disagreed with these 3 statements. So beginning on the left, significant advancement towards large-scale use of hybrid poplar can only happen through active networks of people, such as researchers, growers, and end users, working together to solve complex problems. The strong levels of agreement validate our important assumption that active networks of people are required to advance the use of hybrid poplar. Then the middle statement, the most important role Extension can play to support the use of hybrid poplar is to help people establish connections with others to solve complex problems. This tests and validates our assumption about the role of Extension to innovate large changes. So really our role must go beyond a classic teaching role. And again, I've heard this already this afternoon from some of the other presentations, but our role must go beyond a classic teaching role to become network weavers, helping to strengthen and grow networks of people working to solve a problem. And then finally on the right, another important role for Extension is to help the public overcome misconceptions about hybrid poplar that could create opposition to large-scale plantations. So is it really part of Extension's role to help the public overcome misconceptions? While we did see a high level of agreement with this statement, we did see a higher percentage of neutral response, 17%, than we saw with the other statements. So to conclude this slide, this series of statements validated our assumptions about how extension could best support the adoption and use of hybrid poplar. These assumptions tie into core pieces of our learning model and thus support those pieces of the model. So here are some other key outcomes. We found new collaborators for NRI's hybrid poplar program, expanding its impact. Our extension team is working to commercialize NRI's top hybrid poplar clone, which is named InnovaTree. I brought 5 tree nurseries into the hybrid poplar network, and they're currently evaluating InnovaTree, and 2 of them are very interested in beginning to sell it. And we'll be submitting a plant patent soon on InnovaTree. So attention from university administration to our work on this project resulted in a large infusion of funds, which will be used to carry the work forward. We also built new connections or strengthened connections between 12 private companies and the hybrid poplar network. I have quotes from several of these companies that discuss how the connections they built through our project help them bring products to market, hire the right people, and expand opportunities. And now we'll wrap things up. I'd like to just talk about my experience with this project, which really shows the power of the social ecological innovation in action model. When I started in this role 3 years ago, I had no experience with hybrid poplar. And I thought this would be a typical extension education position. Turned out that what was needed was quite different. This model was flexible but not chaotic. It gave me a toolbox and a compass for direction. We are much further down the road when we started, but it's not the road we expected. The adaptiveness of the model helped us to pivot and to take on new challenges. This model is also transferable to other areas requiring innovation. My team is continuing our work with hybrid poplar, but we're also beginning to work with the assisted migration of trees. So we will continue to use the model to guide our work on both of these complex problems. And I'd like to acknowledge our gratefulness for funding from USDA NIFA for this project. And with that, thank you everyone for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back to our moderator, Bill.
Jeff, thank you very much. That was great, and you do have a couple of minutes for any questions or comments from the crowd. Or we'll also ask if there are any, is there anything for Alice as well, since we have a few minutes left. I don't have my chat up to see if there's anything in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions yet.
I thought it was interesting, Jeff. You said what the last slide you had up there. What were those? Were those little hybrid poplar seedlings?
Oh, the picture where, yeah, this project went a number of directions that I just didn't foresee ahead of time. But we had some key retirements on our team, which meant that I was growing the hybrid poplar seedlings. And that was a photo of me in the greenhouse with a batch of young seedlings. But the neat thing about this hybrid poplar, what we've done, we've taken native cottonwood, eastern cottonwood from southern Minnesota, and then we crossed it with European black poplar. And what the European black poplar brings into it is rootability. So you can literally take a 3 to 4 inch stick of cutting, a branch from the tree, put it into dirt, water it, give it sunshine, and it'll grow. It'll grow roots. And so this really reduces the cost to raise this on a large scale. Yeah, any other questions or questions for Alice?
Well, great. We're right on time for a break then. If you all would like to go to the virtual coffee or snack machine or local refrigerator, grab yourself a little snack, and we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome back, everyone, for our session number 2 on training technologies and techniques. Pleased to have 3 speakers again with this round of presentations. And let's see, Susie had hers screen up and running there a second ago.
Yeah, I had to unshare so I could turn on my phone and my microphone and my camera.
Great. Okay, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So Susie is with University of California Cooperative Extension Service, and she's going to speak on responding to wildfires by building a culture of prescribed burn or prescribed fire. Looking forward to hearing from you, Susie.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm happy to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work I've been doing over the last 4 years on nurturing prescribed fire skills for private landowners. And just to frame the issue, very little prescribed fire has been done on private land in California, at least recently. We know that our forests are considered frequent fire forests, and they had a very frequent fire regime, meaning each area of the forest probably burned, developing on elevation, depending on that, between every 5 years. Where I'm at, I live at 6,200 feet in elevation, and that was every 15 years. And so those were fires started by lightning and by Native people. Native people, we had 100 California Indian tribes here in California, and they actively managed the forest using prescribed fire. If you look in the upper hand right-hand picture, you'll see arrows that point at burn scars on a tree, and the fire was not very intense. It just left a little scar, and the tree was able to heal over it. So you can see fires hit that tree every 5, 6, 7 years. In general, the Sierra Nevada has an intact native forest, not a forest that's been planted for management. We do have industrial timber companies, so we have second growth and we have third growth, but we do have a lot of great data about pre-settlement, how the forests were managed. And it was in about 1849 with the gold rush in California that a lot of these practices changed. So we know that we had frequent fire forests, and we're having a forest health and wildfire crisis. So reintroducing good fire is seen as part of the solution here in California. Private landowners have a key role to play. They own somewhere around 7 million acres of forest land. So that's non-industrial private forest landowners. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And to be able to move forward with this, we need a lot of outreach and education to help people learn. So just a few brief facts about full-time fire suppression in the West. After around 1910, the US Forest Service decided that all fires should be suppressed and that fire in the forest was an enemy. In California, there was still what was considered light burning until about 1924. The US Forest Service researchers at that time concluded that light burning was ineffective, impractical, and economically indefensible. And if you look at that picture on the right, you can see that's kind of the level of forest density that we had in some of our frequent fire forests. And for traditionally trained foresters, that was considered poorly stocked. And so the California State Board of Forestry agreed it was a bad practice and it was outlawed. In the Southeast, the Forest Service relented much more quickly than CAL FIRE relented here in California. There was legalized burning on rangelands in California in the 1950s for encroachment of woody plants to improve pasture and forage. that got to up to about 200,000 acres burned annually, but then it declined. And part of that was the liability, more people moving into rural areas. And if you lose a fire, then you can be taken to court and the suppression costs could be charged to you. So in around the 1980s, a solution that was considered innovative at the time was developed, where our state forestry and fire agency, CAL FIRE, could come on private landowners' property and burn for them and assume the liability. So there was a lot of hope around this program, and it did seem to work for a while. However, because CAL FIRE is our fire suppression agency, and that's the #1 priority, a lot of, over time, very little acres were burned. This does look better now. I only have data through 2014 and 15, but it has increased quite a bit, but not bigger than this scale on this graph. So this is from a book by George Gruhl called Fire in the Sierra Nevada. This is what it looks like once fires are suppressed in a frequent fire forest. This is a high elevation site on the left. There was never any logging. On the right is those years later after all fires have been suppressed. So you really see tons of growth coming in. The next picture is Yosemite National Park on the left in 1866. And by 1961, it's very dense because fire has been taken out of that ecosystem. So basically, we have a lot of overcrowded and unhealthy forests. That leads to competition and tree mortality. They're more susceptible to native bark beetle outbreaks. We lost around 180 million trees during the last big drought between 2012 and 16. There's lots of trees that in places they wouldn't have used to have been, such in shrub areas or on meadows. And now we have very intense high severity fires. So on the right, you'll see a little map of the Dixie Fire that occurred this summer. That was our first fire of 1 million acres, led to the destruction of the community of Greenville, where I used to live and did extension work for 13 years. The Caldor fires where I live now and was evacuated for 2 weeks. And luckily my town didn't burn, but downhill the Grizzly Flats community did. You know, we're getting very extreme fires that are no longer really containable with the weather conditions that we have. 2020 was a larger season even. There's 100 million acres in California, 32 million are forest, and 4 million acres burned. So somewhere around 4% of the state. That is actually to the level that we think was more common before settlement. However, the impacts are much more intense because without regular fire, the fuels accumulate, and now all the trees are killed instead of having a nice little low severity fire that passes by. And then with climate change, we are really feeling it here in the Southwest of the United States. 2021 was our hottest summer on record. And 2021 was also our driest year on record. So you can see that we have a situation. So what can a forest landowner do? A #1 thing that I constantly tell with our forest landowner population through a number of different efforts, including forest stewardship workshops and prescribed fire workshops, is that they need to reduce the fuels and reduce the density on their properties. And so these are all great methods of doing that. Hand thinning, mastication. In the middle, there is a small Felder buncher, removing small material. We have a limited biomass market, but you could chip up the small stuff. People do a lot of work by themselves, making piles and burning them. I would say there's a little renaissance of grazing as a management tool right now. One of my colleagues on the coast developed a grazing matching system. If you want goats and someone has goats, it's called, I think it's called grazing.match or match.grazing, something like that, kind of on a dating service. And then broadcast burning as a technique for reducing fuels. So we have a lot of constraints on actually having our forests managed to the level that we think they should to be more resilient. The size of the ownerships can make some of these activities that I've described uneconomical. So we have 75,000 private forest landowners in California that own 10 acres or more. 90% of them own less than 50 acres. And so it's hard to spread costs over a small ownership. There are cost share funding programs available through the state and feds. The planning and permitting knowledge curve is steep. We have a shortage of registered foresters, contractors, wood products facilities. And for actually getting prescribed fire done, we have faced the overall professionalization of prescribed fire. It's considered something that agencies do and long-term experts can only tackle. And on top of that, there've been, laws outlawing it. It's been legal. It's been understood that it's important since the 70s or 80s, but we can't seem to get there. There's a lack of clarity in permitting. And so that's still an issue, whether someone will give you a permit, even if you have experience. And just that opportunity to develop experience burning is one of the biggest issues. There's very little place that you could go to actually get experience. So there's a widespread agreement, but it just hasn't been happening to the level it needs to be. So Cooperative Extension in California did hire their first county-based fire advisor in around 2015. And many of you know my awesome colleague, Lenya Quinn Davidson, who was our first fire advisor. She started hosting workshops about private land burning in 2016 and 17. She took some of her local ranchers to Nebraska and learned about prescribed burn associations there and brought the model back to California. And now the Humboldt County PBA has done over 1,000 acres of burning there in their county. And so she was a real inspiration to a lot of the rest of us in Extension, even though we don't have fire in our title. She helped us do a workshop in the Sierra Nevada. Her region, I should just say, is around an 8-hour drive away. It's a very big state we live in. So we did our first workshop in 2018, and we did it at our own facility, UC Berkeley Blodgett Research Forest, who's been burning and had their own burn program for about 10 years. And there was so much enthusiasm, we decided to apply for a CAL FIRE grant to expand our effort, and we got the funding. We also got funding to have a fire educator, a coordinator for a prescribed fire council. Let's see. So in the first 2 years, we did workshops all over the Sierra Nevada. Here's our lineup for 2019, going up and down the Sierra Nevada mountain range. You can see the topics there. We discuss permitting, the VMP program, fire weather, air quality, PBAs, fire history, all of that, and tried to do a two-day workshop, one classroom and one actually with burning. So over the last 4 years that I've been doing this, we've tried a number of different workshop strategies. Classroom day plus a burn day. If it rains, it's a field trip. And we have a couple of facilities we've been offering those at. We've also been able to partner with larger landowners, including Southern California and Edison, which has timberlands that they've been burning in for 40 years. And we're starting to branch more into working with landowners. I've also tried one-day workshops everywhere. Everyone comes together to burn at a different time. I've tried classroom in the morning, burning in the afternoon. I've tried Zoom sessions in the evening, field day the next day, and a lot recently of one-day burn prep field days with landowners. So over the last 4 years, it's about 1,000 people that have been through about 30 workshop days. We've had mostly landowners, owners of ranch, forest, farmland, camps, homeowners, but you will see as you move down, there's quite a few other types of folks coming, consultants, Natural Resources Conservation Service, other conservation organizations, CAL FIRE themselves, resource conservation districts. There is basically nowhere else to go to learn about prescribed fire or participate in a prescribed fire if you're an untrained person in California. And so we're also close to the state capitol. So we really ended up getting a lot of state workers who wanted to understand the issue and how it works. From surveying participants, most of them had never seen or taken part in a burn. They don't understand that burning on private lands is common elsewhere. Just taking part in a burn has changed their understanding dramatically. And what I've seen over the years is it's the first 15 minutes. I just recently hosted a burn and a guy showed up late. And so a large area was kind of burning at, 6 inches flame length. And he was like, oh my God, this is frightening. And I said, well, wait 15 minutes. And then he came back 15 minutes later. And he's like, oh, you're right. It's just behaving. It's okay. So it makes a complete difference on people's mindset. People generally have very small goals to just do small areas. And like I said, we get a lot of people from state agencies. Looking back on the last 4 years, I feel like in the last 2 years, I'm doing less of this bringing people to me and now finding these early adopters, nurturing them, having them teach each other things through a workshop setting with extension. And so I think that's great. That shows kind of the dissemination of the model. And then we've been starting prescribed burn associations. So there's now 15 or so in California, and it's people helping each other to learn how to burn. I started 2 of them myself in my 4 counties. Here's just how it went. July, I held a Zoom meeting. Nobody in my area was starting one, so I decided I was the one most qualified to do it. So I sent out a press release and I had 40 people show up. A bunch of people said they wanted to be on a steering committee. We held a field trip. We held a pile burn on a non-burn day, and then we just decided to go ahead and try for a broadcast burn. Our planning took about 2 weeks. We had a prescription. We have one guy who volunteered who's got a lot of technical knowledge. We wrote a burn plan. We had a CAL FIRE visit. We got a permit and we had a burn day. So here's our landowners here. They're giving a briefing. Here's grandma, daughter, and the 2 granddaughters doing the test fire, and the neighbor who wandered over and had never seen one before, and our holding crew who don't have to do much because, as you can see, the conditions are pretty mellow. Here's after the burn, but before the pizza and beer. That's the group that came together. It was about 20 people. The landowner was very happy. He has been doing work on his own, and he has burned 1 or 2 acres at a time with his family. But with this group, he could burn 3 acres, which is still not a lot. But if you can see, we have 75,000 landowners, and if they each burn 1 or 2 acres, then you're actually starting to make a dent in our problem. So there are a lot of advances in prescribed fire in California happening right now. Huge amounts of funding are going into this issue. We have governor's task force. We have new state policies. We have a new gross negligence standard for recovering suppression costs. We have a new burn boss program. And we recently received half-time funding for a coordinator for each of the PBAs that I started just 6 months ago. Which is really exciting. So I really feel like this process has worked for us. And just some observations from my 4 years is that starting from scratch on a prescribed fire culture is sort of daunting. You really do need to work with your agencies, but you also can't let them say no. Definitely heard that a lot, but we've been managing to work with landowners and make things happen whenever even agencies aren't bought in. Participants are very enthusiastic. We got a lot of people who really want to do more. Our classes always fill up. Let's see, burn days, they've been successful about half the time, I would say. Otherwise, we have issues, rained out, too dry, just, everything going on. And then finally, I just would say that it's possible to work on this issue without being a fire professional. So I'm a forester. I had participated in a few prescribed fires. I had to start slow when I look back on it. If I had been a fire professional, I'm sure I could have gotten to a quicker stage right away with actually burning on people's property. But I felt I went as quickly as I was comfortable. There are many training opportunities available, and I would totally recommend doing a prescribed fire training exchange as a way to feel more comfortable working in fire if you don't feel qualified in fire. So I just take it at the pace that you're ready. And that's it.
Thank you, Susie. You left 1 minute for questions.
I tried.
I do not see anything in the chat just yet, but if someone has a quick question for Susie, that'd be great. And if we could get Rado's presentation ready to go, or Rado, my apologies.
Hi, this is Julia. Can I have a quick question?
Please.
I don't understand so much about the burning intensity that you're looking after. In the first picture or first slides, you showed a tree that had gone through many burnings and had an impact to the kind of the quality of the timber. But these fires that you are introducing, are they actually touching the trees, or is it just so low that they don't even like leave any marks to the timber?
I would say that depends on the goals of the landowner conducting the burn. I've worked with some landowners who have very few trees, and we go to great lengths to rake around the trees so that there's very little impact to them. Some landowners have a higher tolerance. As I described, we have too many trees, so killing a few for me is always a goal. But some landowners don't appreciate that at all. And then most of them really probably won't be timber in the long term. So their goals really are to reduce fire hazard rather than produce high quality timber.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Okay. You are up next, our technical education for primary and secondary hardwood industries. And Rado hails from Purdue University.
And thank you, Bill. I've been at Purdue about 25 years now, and my area is in wood processing and industrial engineering. So a little bit of change of gears from forestry. Really, the program I want to talk about, I call Hardwood U, or Hardwood University. And this follows over the last 20 years. I took a couple other programs that we called Wood is Good, and for about 7 years, and then another one, Wood is Better, for about 5 years. But as those of you that are familiar with the wood science and wood products departments around the US know that they are disappearing very quickly, or already have disappeared for most of them. There's probably less than a handful left. And Purdue is another one on this list. And with our undergraduate program being canceled, there's virtually almost no place now where industry professionals can get any kind of a technical training. And so that was my goal when I, a couple of years ago, started this Hardwood University. My audience in this program is, this is kind of 101 basic stuff. Employees new to the hardwood industry, or employees that are preparing for advancement, cross-training and such. I had a number of upper management people that maybe came to industry without any wood experience participate as well. Instructors, it's me and another colleague. We only really have 2 people now left in Indiana working in the wood products industry. And then I have a few subject matter guest speakers as needed. The Hardwood University is an annual program. It's once per month and consists each year of 9 events. And we have 3 tracks to this. You can think of it as 3 different colleges. One is for primary industry, focused on log buyers, sawmill, stave mill, veneer mill, lumber drying operators, and woodland owners. And then we have a second, it's a secondary industry focused for furniture, cabinet, millwork, and other manufacturers of wood products. Indiana is typically number 3 or number 4 state in hardwood products manufacturing in US, so we have a fairly sizable industry. And then we have also training a la carte, and this is where we have a list of or menu of workshops and training opportunities we offer, and company can invite us to come in to do the full day, half day, or maybe lunch training at their location. And then I'm going to get a little more specific. So for 2021 and 2022, what I'd call academic year, this series of 9 workshops consisted, the first one was on a tree and log quality, scaling and measurement. So we took a group of people into woods, and then we talked about which trees and why would be good to mark for removal. We learned how to grade these trees and scale them and price them. And then we had the group cut down a few trees, and we talked about how to properly buck a hardwood tree. And then we graded logs and estimated the volume of lumber from those logs. And we gave them some, basic techniques on how to do this kind of stuff. The second one was marketing hardwood veneer, stave, and logs. All of these are full day workshops and training opportunities. And so here we had industry buyers from large veneer company talk about what they look for when they buy veneer logs. But every woodland owner wants to know what would make a good stave log. That is now a big competition in the market. And what makes a saw log or a pallet log, how to grade them. And then we cut some up and look at some interior features. And we also went into the slicing mill and looked at what these features that we observed in the woods would look like in a finished product, in a hardwood veneer. And then we also attended active logging job. The next one was on a grade sawing of hardwood logs. And so we went to a sawmill. We had a half a day of lecture, followed by me cutting up a log very slowly on a wood miser and talking about what's the difference between softwood versus hardwood, grade sawing, what kind of decisions they have to make. And then that was followed by a field trip through a big, large sawmill so they can see how that's done professionally. The next month was one on sawmill equipment maintenance, so specifically saw filing and knife grinding. This is where I had to bring some experts in that was outside my technical area. The next one we had in January, which was sawmill efficiency and quality control. So we talked about each operation in a sawmill, how to optimize it, how to set up a statistical quality program, how to do yield studies and stuff. And I was thinking about doing this one myself, but I had the opportunity to get 3 people from across the country. So this was a good one to do on a Zoom, actually. It's the only thing I've done during COVID that was not in person. But to save cost, I had all these speakers do this virtually. The next one was on air drying lumber. And then one in March was on a kiln drying of hardwood lumber. One thing that I'd like to say is that the way I designed this, we start at 9 o'clock in the morning. That gives time for anybody anywhere from Indiana to drive to where we need to be. I select locations, not in a classroom here at the university, but at a place that really displays well. It's got a state-of-the-art technology or very knowledgeable operators in the industry. And so we meet at that place, have a half a day of lectures, and then half a day of practical learning from that company and from the operators. And this works particularly well because first, most of these companies sponsor the lunch and then some swag and stuff like that. But also, I probably average between 15 to 25 attendees each workshop. And, probably good half of them is there to see the competitors or to see other people in the industry that they would otherwise not have opportunity to do. And then we go through 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening and everybody has time to return home. So nobody's really needing to go to a hotel. So it's pretty low cost. I'm going to be teaching one tomorrow on hardwood lumber quality and grading. And I actually have a National Hardwood Lumber Association inspector coming and doing that one with me. So this is the annual curriculum. we started with hardwood industry tour. Actually, I didn't mention that earlier, where we go to Indiana Tree Farmer of the Year, learn about the growing trees. We stop by very near to the maple syrup operation. Then we follow that with active logging job and sawmill. This is kind of Easter egg hunt, like a rally around the state. People get itinerary for 2 or 3 days, and we meet at particular place. They drive personal cars, pool together, and then we get a tour, and then move on to the next place, to the lunch, and another place into it. And then the same thing next day, and after it. And so we follow that with a sawmill, slicing hardwood veneer mill, furniture company, and a kitchen cabinet company. And then the rest of them I already mentioned. For our secondary track, we do the same tour, but then it's more like a wood science 101, talking about moisture content. Then the next one is on shrinking and swelling of wood, rough mill operations, wood gluing, CNC manufacturing, common wood processing equipment, furniture design and testing, and sustainable wood products development. And our third, maybe I should go back to this one and say that we were thinking doing this one around the state, like we do the primary industry, but Indiana has 2 large clusters of industry, one in the northeast and one in the south. And we are now negotiating a permanent location for this series of workshops, where we are pairing up with local industries, with Chamber of Commerce, and with Work One Employment Center, where we will be doing workforce development on a location. So rather than them traveling, we will be traveling to the permanent location year-round. And then every 2 weeks in between these, we will have hands-on tool and equipment manufacturers do demonstrations or something like this. So we may have twice the number of lectures on this one. And these are our a la carte workshops. When somebody would like something from this list, or something that they would like that is not on the list, we will design it for them and do one of these. So I paired up with Indiana Hardwood Lumbermen Association. That's the logo that you've been seeing at the bottom. And it's a joint program now with Purdue University and Indiana Hardwood Lumbermen Association. We market it 2 ways. One is a season pass. So once a year, we do a mail out to several thousand members of the association. And a season pass will get any manufacturer for $1,000. They can send up to 4 employees to any workshop. And then this is a self-supporting program. So anybody can sign up individually without having to go to all of them. I think we charge $79, and that covers whatever things you get as a handouts, tools, lunch. I probably have half of the attendees from season passes and half that come individually. More important, we garnered some attention. I now have a sponsor for next year, somebody, Wood-Mizer specifically, that's 40 years in the business. So they underwriting the cost of this to run this whole thing for next year. I've had people from 5 different states now ask me if we could replicate this in their states. I've got a grant now to conduct a series of workshops on another topic. And I have a couple associations who would like to take this national, but it's hard because it's so regionally focused. So I don't quite know how we're gonna work with that, but I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but this is where I can be reached for more information. I know there's few wood products people on this Zoom call, but not too many. But reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions.
Thank you, sir. I know there might not be a lot of wood products people online, but many of us have a tremendous interest in wood products, no doubt, because it's all connected to the land and the resource and the landowner. So very much appreciate that input, and good to know that you are still conducting these programs in light of lots of challenges across the country and world. So appreciate your interest in that. Do we have questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Chuck Ray at Penn State. Hi, Rod.
Chuck.
How you doing? I was going to ask you, I was watching your audience and I was trying to figure out, you introduced the concept as university. And I was trying to figure out whether or not you actually had people going through each course to get this certificate, or do you have a different audience for each course?
Yeah, so we've sold, I probably get 20 people that come with season passes. And first 5 or 6 out of 9, out of 8 were attended by almost all of them. But you know how business is right now. I think they have to wait. Do I want to finish this, or do I, you know, they cannot leave the production right now. There's no employees. And so last couple, I had fewer of them, maybe 2 out of 5 companies send people. And the ones that are individual, you know, a lot of, there's half of that half, so maybe quarter, are woodland owners, a couple retired people, and a couple hours that just like to, you know, cut their own timber and make boards and dry them. And some others are just by the topic of interest. But I showed the picture of the diploma in there. You know, I think I told them, if you only miss one, so 8 out of 9, you will get the little diploma that I print out here on my own printer.
Yeah, so what was the percentage of, I mean, not percentage, I guess, but how many of your attendees got the diploma over the course of the year?
I think I'm going to have like 5 people that will qualify for it. But I will give them, you know, if they want to come on the next round, we do this when we restarted in May. If they need to catch up, there will be fun. I found out that diploma or that certificate is not a big draw. They really after the information. You know, we have not shut down for COVID like many other states. And so I've done everything in person except that one. And all these people, they want to come in, they want to talk to somebody, they have questions. You know, they want them answered from somebody that knows, and some of them want to meet other people that they normally wouldn't as a group. I've had people driving, you know, from surrounding states for this as well.
Great, thank you very much. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
You may have mentioned this, my apologies, but are you working with other wood products programs in the country to connect some of this together, some of these activities together? Virginia Tech?
Yeah, yes. And specifically, you know, I had that one where I had 3 speakers from around the country, but on a couple of other occasions, for a variety, you know, I know it's hard to listen to me for 10 hours in a day. So I spice it up and, you know, when we are in a conference room and the conditions are favorable, I will have expert connect for 30, 45 minutes from our university and talk a little bit, you know, like Brian Bond, for example, from Virginia Tech.
Great. Thank you again, Rado. That was
thank you.
Really great information. Good to know if things are happening up at Purdue. Yeah. Okay, John, are you ready to share your screen? Our last presentation for the afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're at, is John Punches from Oregon State University. Welcome, John. John's going to talk about developing an integrated wildland fire education training and experiential learning program. So not adaptive, but experiential.
Hey, Bill or somebody there, can you give me permission to share my screen?
Yeah, that's our illustrious host, Bob Barden. I don't know if I can do that, but I don't know if Rado stopped sharing his. I think he did.
I did stop sharing.
Okay.
Rado, you must rate higher than I do because I don't get to share my screen. So.
Try it now. I have two options from my end. One participant can share at a time or multiple.
Now we got her. Okay. Yeah. So, hey, everybody. Good to sort of see you all. Rado, great presentation. There's going to be some similar themes, I think, but I'm looking at it from a little bit different perspective. I'm not working wood science so much anymore. I'm focused in the Pacific Northwest, within Oregon specifically, and working now in the college to help expand our capacity to develop people to really work on the wildfire problem that's faced here in the United States. And I just want to kind of scroll through some ideas here and just start with this kind of broad statement that I think there's a whole heck of a lot of us in the United States that are recognizing that we have a very serious wildfire problem. And this is not a problem imposed on us by nature. It's a problem largely imposed on us by our own actions. So in the Western United States, really in the United States as a whole, we now have well over a century of very effective wildfire suppression that has had the side effect of changing our forests and our rangelands. And so that exclusion of fire has made forests and rangelands have much higher fuel density, much more contiguous fuels. We've changed the species composition in many cases. We have a lot more ladder fuel capacity within our forest areas, particularly in the Western United States. And what you're seeing out of that, when we combine it with the increase in the number of homes that are built in forests, we have a much expanded wildland urban interface. We've got infrastructure from transportation. We've got infrastructure from power line services and things running through these areas. And so we have a much higher incidence now of large wildfire. And, we used to talk about these rare occurrences where we had wildfires in the United States that exceeded 100,000 acres or about 40,000 hectares. And we now refer to those as megafires. And now we're at the point where we're talking about gigafires, which are those fires that exceed 1 million acres or 400,000 hectares. And those are becoming fairly regular occurrences or things that encroach upon that area. So significant problem. And if you're a fire person, and I know Jennifer's on here, so there's at least some of you that are familiar with these fire triangles. We talk about the fire triangle, which is this intersection of fuel and oxygen and heat that happens kind of on an instantaneous basis in a very small kind of spatial scale that results in combustion. And then from a larger perspective, from those of us that teach about or work on fires, we're thinking about fire behavior, which says, well, we have this kind of landscape of fuel that varies in structure and arrangement, and it's impacted by or influenced by topography and weather, and that happens over a little bit larger scales. And maybe the timeline in there is that those happen over a period of a half a day or a week or a month. I mean, those are the influences there, right? But more in this kind of context of longer term changes, we're now talking about the fire regime triangle, which is this interaction of ecosystem scale vegetation impacted by climate and then the potential for ignitions. And in many cases, we through human activity have changed all three of those. We've changed that vegetation base layer. By our activities, we've changed our climate, and we're changing our ignition profile. So if you're changing all three of those, obviously we've changed our fire regimes. And it's probably no longer applicable to say that these mega fires or gigafires are out of the range of normal fire regimes. That's the new normal. That's the fire regimes that we have created. I would argue that really the answer to looking at fire is not about trying to deal with fire regime change so much as it is a socio-economic and environmental interaction. So maybe there's another triangle that we need to be thinking about, is how do we deal with the complexities of a changed environment that reflects everything in that fire regime triangle, but within the context of economic limitations, economic considerations, and what we are socially willing to do in order to address fire. And are we willing to actually see fire as something that is an important and necessary disturbance mechanism in our environments naturally, in our ecosystem? So we can't really exclude it. And if we do exclude it, we end up back in the same kind of problem. And there's lots of recognition of that, and people saying that we should forge ahead and restore ecosystems. And I wonder to what extent we suddenly shift the problem instead of fixing the problem. Do we, in our good intention, change the problem from being one of lack of fire to change it to be different types of fire, or change it to being fire that's out of keeping with now what our climate is in a changed climatic structure. So what I want to get across here is that if we're going to fix our fire problem, we need a very nuanced approach. So let's change our perspective here a little bit and just think about how we address fire most places around the globe. So in the United States, we have a very well-developed system for training people and providing them with the experience they need to be effective in wildfire management and suppression, right? So NWCG, National Wildfire Coordinating Group, there's lots of standards. We go through all kinds of training. We build our task books in order to show that we have the experience needed to do that. That trains people who are really good at implementing fire behavior management, fire suppression tactics, things of that nature, right? But we're operating in this larger socioeconomic environmental context in changed environments, under a changed climate, under changed conditions. And so what we're starting to see is a recognition among universities, and Oregon State is maybe a little bit late to the table, but earlier than some, to say we really need to take a more nuanced approach here, that in how we think about managing fire can't just be just about the application of suppression techniques anymore. We need to be thinking in that larger context of how do we place fire in its ecological context and then consider the social and economic constraints within that. That's a more nuanced perspective, and that requires the education component, the things that universities are good with, bringing a research-based approach, thinking in scientific methods that tests our assumptions, that challenges us to be adaptive, and applying those critical thinking skills. And what we're delving into at OSU recently over the last couple of years is this idea that we need to have all of these things, and it shouldn't be siloed. So right now you can come to OSU, you can go to other universities, you can get a degree, you can get a bunch of fire courses maybe embedded in a different degree. But where can you go where you combine that education component with the training component that meets those specific requirements that make you qualified to actually serve on the fire line and to serve in agency roles, and really helps you gain that experiential learning. There's a number of us at OSU that are very dedicated to the idea of combining these three and having an integrated package deal where people can come and get a degree that speaks to the needs of what we're kind of terming professional fire managers and really puts all of these components together. We've been assessing locally within the PNW the demand for this type of a program in our conversations with partners at federal agencies. They have expressed that they're under pressure to develop a much expanded fire services capacity, and they want this level of nuance. They want people who are really in that professional category that can really think about how you keep people safe, but also how you manage the risk of fires across the landscape and within environments. There's a general standard 401 that's through the Office of Personnel Management. That's been in place for many years. They're doing a big revision of that they've asked us to assist with. And they're predicting that there are, within the Pacific Northwest alone, that there are dozens to hundreds annually that need to go through this type of program. Our state, like other states, has recognized the risk associated with fires and with these changing fire environments. There's much more desire to really put resources to work there. So that's another place where there's demand for these types of programs. Our conversations with private contractors who do fire suppression is that they can mostly find people to do the baseline entry job, but they need people trained at a level where they can be leaders, where they can be the crew leaders and above. And when we surveyed our own students who are in our forestry programs and asked them, what is your level of interest in this type of a program? Over 90% said that they would want to take more fire-related classes, even though what we currently offer in our curriculum. So we're working on this. We've been working with a professional panel of fire managers from agencies for the past several months to really identify what they see kind of coming out of that new standard and how it lines up with OSU's curricular offerings. And I offer this here because I think it's interesting to note that the cross-section of the types of courses and kind of critical thinking skills that the professional managers see as needed for the future isn't just about fire and fire behavior. If you look at some of the topics in here, they want to know more about traditional ecological knowledge. They want to know more about rehabilitating ecosystems that have been deprived of fire. They want to think about the social economic interaction. They want to know about a broad range of ecosystems, not just the forested ecosystems, but the whole range of different places where fire occurs and how it interacts with our management of wilderness and forests and how it interacts with wildlife. You read down through the list and you notice that they're also very interested in risk management from like an environmental perspective, but also from a community perspective and from an individual's welfare perspective. So how do we make sure that we're training people to deal with the stresses associated of working in a professional fire capacity? We have a lot of these courses currently available at OSU. Along here on the right-hand side, anything that's in blue are courses that are currently available through our eCampus, which is one of the largest online university offerings that there is. So a lot of those courses are available. In red are courses that we really specifically need to develop. So there's lots of opportunities for developing or refining courses to meet these needs. And we really are seeing a need to have that combination of online capacity for people who want to come in as non-typical students there, who are already in careers. We want to provide for those professional training opportunities for people to develop specific skill sets. And we want to make sure that we are providing the experiential learning that helps new people coming in to get that real observational hands-on learning experience that helps them work well in these environments. So lots of work. This is a very staged and orchestrated bunch of activity. There's lots that needs to be done. So there's a number of us that are already building new modules of curriculum to expand the types of courses that we're offering at OSU. And then over the next couple of years, ramping up the teaching of those. And then concurrent with that, the advising for our students and the advising for any of those non-typical students that would come in who are already in job openings. Concurrently, we're working with NWCG, with the National Wildfire Suppression Association and others to try to think about how we, in a logical manner, incorporate the credentialing, the qualifications into that coursework where it makes sense, without duplicating things that people can readily get through community colleges and other sources, but where it makes sense to have somebody who takes a course in college, gets credit for it, also come out of it with those qualifications, and then lining all of this up with the applicable experience in the field and making sure we have really good internships, work activities outlined so that they can really gain that appropriate experience. It's going to take a big structure to make this happening, so we're investing in director position and supporting positions, making sure we're building capacity and advising. We think that's really going to be necessary to have the integration it's going to take across different platforms to make sure we can transfer credits among universities and community colleges, to think about those articulation agreements. We've got lots of curriculum development to do, and then lots of new instructional opportunities. I can see a future where we're hiring 2 to 3 more people in the next couple of years in order to be able to fully implement these different opportunities. We're right now, just to give you an update of where we are in this process, we are honing in on the kind of like the final list of what we want to include in the updated curriculum for this, identifying the components of that with our federal and some private partners, really working through the process of identifying partners who will work with this. It's going to take more than just a university to make this work. We're going to have partnership opportunities with federal agencies, with private contractors, with state agencies, in order to be able to really fully deliver this type of a program in a way that's meaningful, both for the agencies and for the students, the people engaged in this process. There's MOUs and agreements that need to be in place, both with those entities and with the credentialing, the qualification organizations, primarily with NWCG, the process to make sure that OSU becomes a recognized provider for these types of courses, all the course development, the curriculum proposals and approval processes. Those of you that work on campus and have put together courses, maybe that's old hat to you. It was new to me as an extension guy to find out how much freedom I truly have in extension and how little freedom people who are developing on-campus courses have. So that's been eye-opening. We're starting our certificate and degree proposal process, and all of the stuff it takes to have in place that NWCG training provider status, the instructor certifications. Just because a person comes in and has many years of teaching about fire behavior doesn't mean that they have the right credentials in order to teach within those certificates. conditions there. And then a way to maintain the records for students who are taking these courses prior to them entering some type of agency position. So lots in place. Just as an example of the complexity of all of this as we're working through this process, this is OSU's process for developing a new degree. I don't intend at all for you to read everything that's on the screen. Just pointing that there's 28 steps for us to get through the process to actually have a new degree for professional fire manager. 28 steps, of which 14 are approval points. So 14 different persons at different points in our university have to sign off on this process to actually make it into a new degree. It's similar if we offer it as a certificate as opposed to a degree. So there's 14 places where somebody could say, no, we don't really want you to do that. So we're really working on building the organizational impetus to make this go forward. We're really lucky, those of us who are faculty members and working on this, that we have a very supportive dean of our college and a tremendously supportive department head in the specific department that would end up teaching most of this. So lots going on. And here's the reason I wanted to bring this before you all today. I don't think that OSU is the only university that's looking at this type of approach. I know that University of Idaho does some of this, University of Montana does some of this. There certainly are universities in the Southeast that are doing quite a bit of work around fire and prescribed fire. We can learn from each other and hopefully help each other build this process into something where we can collaborate and have a multi-state, multi-university focus on this. It doesn't make sense to me for me and others to replicate the wheels that you've already built in order to have something that's truly just for Oregon. We want to have something that offers a PNW focus, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for comparing notes and for maybe even sharing resources and providing ways that people can take classes at different universities and get credit across the breadth of that. So I'm going to suggest that maybe there's one more fire triangle here, and that would be about really having this integrated approach to fire that says the best qualified people to manage fires and to be the ones that are those professional fire managers are the ones who benefit from this combination of education, training, and experience. And that's really the approach that we're taking at Oregon State University, and would be very interested in hearing from and collaborating with others who are pursuing or have already developed similar approaches. I'll stop there, Bill.
John, thank you. And it's excellent to see that that you can reinvent the way we think things and get out there on the cutting edge with some of these experiential learning opportunities. So that's exciting to see this, and it gives me hope for the future of where we're going with fire. And like you said, this can be transferred to many, many other different programming areas. So thanks a lot for all the hard work you've done on this. Question in the chat box. I don't know if you can see it. If you want to read it
the question from Mark.
Yeah.
So Mark asks, how do we prepare for conditions where experience in the realm, whoop, I lost it now. Let me back up. Is a moving target, the giga perspective, or perhaps if every fire is unprecedented, how do you train for that? And that's kind of exactly the question that we're trying to address through this combination of saying, you can't train per se for all of the unexpected conditions, but you can to an extent educate for those. You can build in those critical thinking skills. You can build in the knowledge of a wide array of ecosystems, a wide array of how fire interacts with vegetation and topography and climate, and build that broader skill set that helps people think through these changing situations over time. So rather than just having people well-trained for the known, to be well-educated for the complexities of the unknown. So that's really part of what we're aiming for. But within that, in order to be an effective firefighter, there's some things that you definitely need to know. I mean, we've got our watchouts and our standard orders that are pretty much going to be there regardless of whether we're working on a 100-acre fire or a 10,000-acre fire or a 1,000,000-acre fire. I mean, each of us on the fire line are going to have some standards that we apply there. And so all of those interact there. And part of the way that you build that interaction between the education part, the critical thinking part, the background piece, the foundational piece, and that training piece is to actually have those experiential opportunities. And so we're really trying to build all those pieces together to equip people as well as possible, so that when they move from the fire line position into a upper managerial professional fire manager position, that they've got that combination of skill sets that hopefully will allow them to be well equipped for the large tasks that's in front of them.
Thanks.
Yep. And Jennifer, yes, I know we need to chat.
Yeah, so in the chat, Jen Fawcett is talking about a meeting at ANREP. Hopefully those of you in the States and even from around the world here can participate in the Association of Natural Resources Extension Professionals, hosted here in the Heartland in Michigan, United States of America, in Michigan in the summer, and in June, I believe it is. So great time to visit the US, and hope you can make that. And I don't see any other questions. Again, we can back up and ask some questions of Alice, if you can remember the very first presentation. Alice kicked us off and had so much information he ran out of time. So if anybody has a question or a comment from that presentation, or really any presentation, we've got a few minutes here. I don't know if Alice can pull up his presentation, but there were some fascinating graphics that were kind of small to see, but I was interested in how you would decipher those or what they actually meant. I don't know if you can.
Yeah. I can do it. Just a moment.
And while we're waiting, I did want to introduce Antonio Brunori. And it's kind of late over there, but I know I get emails from him all hours of the day. So he works some crazy hours over there in Italy. Antonio, good to see you.
Yes, and, man. Thank you for the great session.
Yes.
And really interesting.
To introduce you because hopefully you can make the last session. And we may have a surprise announcement from you. I know we're not 100% sure just yet, but I wanted to let folks know that you're with us and you're one of our deputy directors, and that you might have some good news for us on the not the next session, but at our business meeting in 2 weeks.
Business meeting, yeah, indeed. I am with you. Unfortunately, here is quite late, and some of my colleagues that wish to participate asked me the registration because it's pretty late, but this is not a lack of interest. It's just a matter of organization. So for sure, if you wish, we can organize some meeting here in Italy. And I already got the testimonial, how do you say, no, the witness, like when you run, no, from the 4 per 100 meter that the Italians won recently over Jamaican and over US. So I really wish to have the opportunity to have a meeting in Europe and in Italy as well.
Great. Okay. Well, more of that to come. That's a little teaser for those of you and that are interested in participating once again in a real experience. And I know Alice is also very heavily involved in possibly co-hosting with us too. And so, Alice, now that you have your presentation up, it was maybe 2/3 of the way through, but there were some interesting graphics, and I was trying to learn how to interpret those, but I don't know if you can get through the presentation or not.
Just stop a bit then. No.
We're getting close. My apologies. I wanted to ask you about these before, but I didn't want to get us behind schedule. I do love the Jamboards. We're starting to use those. There we go. So the text on my screen is too small. Let me get rid of my chats and my participants. What are we looking at there on the right? They look like little islands out there in the ocean.
This is a graphic. We set up 12 different management goals. Then we ask people to score or to give each goal a price. Let's say the €100 was available, and they should split the euros between different management goals. And then we see which goal is more reliable for them. It is some kind of willing to pay method for forest function or ecosystem services. So that was the approach of these surveys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought these little graphics were fascinating. I just was trying to understand how to interpret those.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question for Rado. Rado, are the people engaged in your classes, it seems to me like they're primarily landowners and or mill employees. Are there opportunities there for students in your university programs to also engage in that? Seems like there'd be a really good opportunity to get some interaction with people who are studying those topics with people who are actually doing them.
Yeah, John, thanks. So, let's say on average, I have 20 people, maybe 2 or 3 will be upper management, but had no previous wood experience. Maybe they financial or accounting or new hires. There'll be probably 10 that are operators or managing the shift or something like that, but been in the industry for a while, but maybe don't know about drying or don't know about running a machine or something like that. And there may be maybe 5, 7 landowners or people that are totally new to the industry. And then I don't count in this, of course, I probably have 20 students any given time at Purdue undergraduate, and then a handful, 4, 5, 6 graduates, and all of those are always invited. I always tell them, if you don't have any classes, come with me. And some take me on the offer. Some of our other Purdue employees, like our property managers, manage the forest and stuff, they all come occasionally. Thank you.
Great. And then Alice had another question for him. I was impressed, from Beverly, I was impressed by how many participated in your engagement sessions. What did you get? How did you get so many people to engage?
We did a good commercial, I would say, and we also sent a lot of invitation to different NGOs and public institutions, also to forest owner associations. And then when they were introduced how the process will go, so they were interested to participate, to somehow that their goals will be somehow written in the management plans, because management plans are obligatory for the entire forest area in Slovenia, also in the private forests. So they should somehow respect them and realize the measures which are prescribed in the management plans. And also these management plans are somewhere between practice and policy. So all the people were interested to give some input in the management plans. So that was probably why they joined us so many numbers.
Thank you. Okay, Bob has sent us next week's agenda. If you have a minute to download that, he will also, given his efficiency, more than likely send out information via an email along with, I think the Zoom link went out today. I don't know. I think we had planned to send it out every week, so it'll be at the top of your email list. Is that right, Bob?
Yes.
Great.
So everybody should have got a copy of the program yesterday with a reminder about today, and then again about 45 minutes to an hour before the start of today's session. I had Zoom send out the link again. I'll try to do that again May 3rd.
Thanks, Bob. And thanks again for all your work on this front. I know you do it because you love to do it. But what a great afternoon. It went off without a hitch. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to our newer members and younger members. And we really appreciate you spending some time with us. And yeah, give us some feedback on how this went. We'll probably end up with an evaluation at the end rather than each of these, but I'll talk to Bob about that. But please send Bob, myself, Antonio, Alice, Mark McGallis is online, one of our deputy coordinators. And if you are interested in becoming more involved and active in IUFRO, we certainly would appreciate the help. So thank you, everybody, and see you next week.
See you. Bye.
Bye.